And they're wonderful things because you don't rain on your neighbors below you. They're also a huge maintenance obligation that I really, really overlook. So the cost to maintain a coated deck is about $1.50 to $2 a square foot. It'll depend on how many you have, the location. But basically, they need to be recoated every 4 to 5 years. I think one of the things I saw happen is they used to get done on the paint cycles, but the paint cycles went from 4 to 5 years to 7 to 10. So it's not happening as much. And that coating, when it goes, you're looking at like that other deck where it starts dry rotting everything underneath it. You know, to replace a dry rot deck system, you're at $45 to $65 a square foot, depending on how much framing you get involved in, and it can be pretty substantial. And so this is one that, you know, it's been let go. I think somebody decided that it would be a good idea to nail little nails to the top of it, like this nosing on the stair, which of course just allowed water into the system. And this is the kind of stuff where, you know, handymen do a great job, but then there's some things you need to be careful about. And then by the time we got done with it, everything had to get replaced. Handrails had to be brought up to code. The decks and everything had to be redone in its entirety. So that was plywood up, so it's pretty substantial.
Question.
Yeah.
On the railings, is that ADA code, or is that just multiple family code?
It's multiple family code. So it resonated from an accident that happened on the Golden Gate Bridge where a baby slipped under the railing, and that's where it started. So now they say a 4-inch ball can't pass through the picket space, and that's where it came from. Now, insurance companies, your liability insurance company, usually when they are your property company will come out and do an inspection. Not every, and I still see a lot of handrails that aren't up to current code. So they must have stopped doing or not doing them at all. And they talked about the picket spacing. So, you know, Leslie or somebody there, Jan, would get a letter saying, you know, we've just reviewed your policy, blah, blah, blah. We're going to give the association 6 months to, you know, do something about the picket spacing. The big issue really is the bottom part of it, because that was actually where the accident happened before. So, and for some reason, the insurance carriers didn't pick up on that. So I saw a lot of people go through a lot of expense adding pickets, and then they still have an issue at the bottom of the rail. So here's some of the issues, too, when you talk about things you might be able to do to improve components that you already have to extend life. So maybe the developer didn't give you the best thing coming out of the box. I used to work for a developer for a number of years, and they have these little bean counters back at the office. You know, we do a project, and they'll sit there and they do these cost analysis, and they keep saying, well, we can get it to go 10 years, and we won't do this, we won't do that, and they just, you know, they keep turning the screws. We'll save another, you know, another 100,000 here, another 100,000 there, and you know, and then at the end of the day, you got a building that lasts 10 years. I mean, it's amazing what happens with those guys. And I was in charge of the warranty maintenance department, so I got to see all that stuff on the backside when it didn't work. So I'm kind of picky about this. So flashings are probably a big thing where I see developers don't spend a lot of money. It's not a huge expense when you're building something, but it is a cost, and they don't see. It's not something that I think that the average consumer sees when they go and set a building. So when we're talking about deck flashings and coatings, you know, to install proper flashings when you build it, it's like $12 to $18 a square foot, but to replace the deck, you're at $45 to $65, depending on framing decay. And here's one. So here's a waterproof deck, and they just nailed the railing right into the top of the flashings. We got openings down here, the T111 sign Darren was talking about before, and then a fascia. And this is, you know, all this is just going to do is allow water into this whole thing, and this whole deck system was going to rot. We caught this early enough so we actually could just come back in and install the proper flashings in order to save this whole thing before it went awry. But those are the kinds of things that, you know, having somebody come out and look at your property might be things, you know, this might be a good thing to do now so you're not spending 6 times as much later to actually replace the necks. Okay, windows are kind of one of those dicey things. So how many associations actually are responsible for their windows? Probably not very many. So this is like the homeowner thing, and this is where the attorneys and I don't agree. Because from a construction standpoint, a window opening is probably one of the most problematic waterproofing things you'll find on a property. And the window units themselves not performing. So to repair a leaking window frame, the actual frame, which is usually unit owner responsibility, not association, is probably a $40 deal. If you do them all at the same time, it's probably less. To repair the damage from leaky windows, I've seen it goes anywhere from like $1,000 to $15,000, depending on how much mold and decay and dry rot. These things leak a little tiny bit over long periods of time, and it seems like no one ever catches them right away. They're just, it's that little drip that happens every time it rains because the track fills up with water, and they leak in the corners, or they're not quite properly flashed, and there's all kinds of issues. If you have these little like half moons down at the bottom of your window frame, probably means the corner of this window frame is leaking. And it's a pretty common thing you'll see, particularly on the older aluminum frame windows. But I'm seeing a lot of the newer vinyl windows where that joint's cracking. They're welded together, and there's a lot of issues on those. And that's not something, the board's not going to see this. This is something a homeowner's probably going to see. And they probably won't report it. They'll probably paint over it. And those are the kinds of things. And then eventually, this whole bottom of the wall will start to decay. And that's, usually when Leslie or somebody gets the call saying, I've got a problem. And, the problem's huge. And then we're into, okay, who's responsible for this? That's always the fun one. So then goes to the attorney opinion letters come out. And then all that stuff, and then you got this guy's house opened up, and we're all arguing back and forth, and who's going to pay for what, and it gets to be quite a little thing. Most of the condominium developments that we do big repair projects on, the attorneys will say, association, just include the windows, replace them, get them up to snuff, and go from there. Retrofit windows are also a big problem in this area because they don't really waterproof well, and a lot of times we'll get resulting damage from those as well. So on a fixed aluminum frame window, if you don't have a track, you can actually just drill a little hole in this corner and inject it with sealant. So it's not a big deal. And if it's like the other one over here, we just clean this little area back here where the actual frame comes together, and then we just inject sealant in there, and it solves the problem. I mean, it's a really simple fix.
What is that device you're showing?
That's a moisture meter on red. So that's, you come in and, we'll come in with these little moisture meters and our infrared cameras, and you can find out where a lot of water's coming in and stuff that may not be obvious. Here's the thing, I love these. I walk a lot of properties, and so they had just ground all the sidewalks in this. At some point, this just needs to get replaced. So maintenance isn't always the best thing, but I expect you they spent $65 having this thing ground, and they were actually still doing them when I was out there. So whatever tree root was on this was pretty aggressive, and they need to pull this up and replace it. So I think those are some of the things that I know budgetary liability things, but they don't always last very long. So and it's ugly. So and that's kind of when it makes more sense to replace versus maintain. And that was kind of like one of the things like coming out to your property and look at it, like people with shingles and different siding products and stuff like that. Sometimes it just makes more sense not to spend a lot of money on maintenance. You get a roof that's towards the end of its useful life. A tune-up can get pretty expensive, and how much extra years you're going to get out of it. It might be, let's just start replacing the roofs now or something like that. So it's not always, changing oil isn't always the best thing. So wood decks, how many people have wood decks in their association? Yeah, the wood decks are a real problem. So, over the years, unlike probably when we were all kids, we put redwood decks in. It was all this nice vertical grain, knot-free wood. Now you go to Home Depot and you look at redwood, and it's mostly white. It's all new growth redwood. And the stuff doesn't last. Very wide grain. You're lucky if it'll last 10 years before it dry rots. There's a lot of composite products out there, like Trex and TimberTech and all these other things that are man-made. The man-made products have pluses, they have minuses, they've had product issues with them. So if you guys are looking at those products, you probably should do some research. The warranty is always very important on those to make sure that they're right. And then the other thing is what it takes to install those, because wood frame decks we used to have what they call 24 spacing on the joists, but most of these composite products want 16. So you've got some extra expense usually when you're looking at some of those to install them correctly. So to install deck boards is, $6.50, $12 a square foot, depending on, what's involved with the flashings. And then when you get into these deck framing systems, you're back up to the $24 to $45 if you let the whole thing just rot out, which unfortunately a lot of people do. I mean, have associations where, the deck boards of the unit are a responsibility, and the framing's the associations. That's always my favorite. That is such a tough deal. Because you've no